The introduction. The small, affluent town of Maplewood Hills rarely saw scandal. The people enjoyed their manicured lawns and quiet lives, content in their routine. But at the heart of Maplewood was the Caldwell family. Marcus Caldwell, a respected businessman and widower, and his son, Jeremy, a man in his late 20s striving to live up to his father's imposing reputation. The Caldwells were admired, envied even. But as everyone would soon discover, admiration hit a growing storm within their home. Marcus was a towering figure, both physically and professionally. Known for his success in real estate development, he had turned Maplewood Hills from a humble town into a thriving suburb. His influence was as undeniable as his personal sacrifices. The love of his life, Amelia, had passed away years ago, leaving a void he'd never quite managed to fill. Instead, he poured his energy into his work, raising Jeremy with the same strict principles that had defined his own career. Jeremy, in contrast, was introverted and prone to self-doubt. Living in the shadow of his father's success, he felt inadequate despite his accomplishments. He tried his hand at real estate, but found little fulfillment. When he wasn't struggling with his career, he battled the insecurities his father's constant pressure ignited within him. Jeremy wanted independence, yet he couldn't help but crave his father's approval. Then there was Anna Myers, Jeremy's girlfriend of a year. They'd met at a local cafe, where her vibrant spirit drew him in. Anna had an effortless charm that seemed to captivate everyone she met. She was ambitious, with a background in marketing, and dreamed of breaking into the business world. Her mysterious past and piercing gaze gave her an allure Jeremy couldn't resist. As their relationship grew, he introduced her to his father, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that would change all their lives. Their first meeting was at a Caldwell family dinner. Anna, wearing a modest dress that nonetheless accentuated her striking features, seemed at ease despite the imposing company. Marcus, usually reserved, found himself intrigued by her confidence and wit. She spoke of her dreams, and as the conversation flowed, Marcus felt drawn to her vibrant energy, a stark contrast to the loneliness that had settled into his life. From that night on, Marcus found excuses to see her more frequently. At first, they were benign interactions, a shared coffee at business events, or coincidental run-ins at local restaurants. Yet each encounter added a subtle tension that neither could deny. Anna was aware of Marcus's admiration, and in a way, she found herself flattered. His gaze held a warmth she hadn't experienced before, a stark difference from Jeremy's sometimes anxious demeanor. Meanwhile, Jeremy was oblivious to the growing connection between his father and Anna. He was thrilled that his father seemed to approve of her, hoping it signified a newfound acceptance of his life choices. The strained relationship between father and son began to soften, with Anna becoming an unexpected bridge between them. Jeremy found comfort in this new dynamic, unaware of the undercurrents simmering beneath the surface. For Anna, the allure of the Caldwell name and the power it represented was irresistible. She admired Jeremy's kindness, but his father's commanding presence and success captivated her more deeply than she wanted to admit. In her mind, Marcus embodied the life she had always aspired to, a life of stability, influence, and legacy. As the days passed, she began to entertain thoughts she knew were dangerous, wondering if she could perhaps have more than she'd initially bargained for. It was during a fundraiser gala, an event Marcus attended annually, that the tension between them became undeniable. Marcus had invited Anna as Jeremy's date, but the chemistry between them seemed to overshadow everyone else in the room. As they discussed art and literature, Marcus couldn't ignore the way Anna's gaze lingered on him, nor could he dismiss the thrill it sent through him. Jeremy watched them from a distance, proud of his girlfriend for fitting in so seamlessly. He didn't recognize the connection forming before him. He only saw his father finally taking an interest in his life. It was a rare and cherished moment for him, though it was rooted in a foundation he would one day come to resent bitterly. That night, as they parted ways, Marcus and Anna shared a brief wordless exchange. In the parking lot, Under the dim streetlights, their hands brushed ever so slightly, a fleeting, innocent gesture that both dismissed as inconsequential. Yet they both knew it meant something. An invisible line had been crossed, marking the beginning of a dangerous game. Anna lay awake that night, thoughts swirling. She couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward Marcus, nor the allure of the life he represented. Jeremy was gentle and sweet, but Marcus was powerful, a force of nature who embodied everything she'd ever wanted. She felt a thrill at the idea of having both men's affections, yet she knew the risks. One wrong step, and her carefully constructed life could come crashing down. And so, the stage was set. Beneath the surface of the Caldwell household, an intricate web of desire, ambition, and betrayal was beginning to take shape. Each member of this triangle remained blissfully unaware of the darkness they were weaving, one that would soon spiral out of control and lead them all toward a tragic end. Hidden desires emerge. Days passed, and the encounters between Marcus and Anna became frequent, though always under the guise of coincidence. They never planned these meetings outright, but their unspoken understanding seemed to draw them to the same places at the same times. It was a delicate dance, one neither dared to name, but both eagerly anticipated. For Anna, these encounters were thrilling. For Marcus, they brought a sense of youth and excitement he hadn't felt in years. It was at a networking event in a nearby city that they met unexpectedly, without Jeremy by their side. Anna had gone as a representative of her marketing firm, hoping to secure new clients, while Marcus was there to oversee business expansions. When they noticed each other across the crowded hall, an unspoken tension hung in the air, and neither could resist the gravitational pull drawing them together. "Fancy seeing you here," Marcus greeted her, his voice casual but his gaze intense. Anna smiled, her heartbeat quickening. "I suppose we're just in tune with each other's schedules," she replied playfully, a glint of something mischievous in her eyes. They spent the evening talking, moving from topic to topic, as if they had known each other for years. Marcus was captivated by her intelligence and ambition, qualities that reminded him of his own rise to success. Meanwhile, Anna found herself entranced by Marcus's commanding presence and the stories of his accomplishments, so different from the quiet life she'd grown up with. Their laughter grew louder as the hours passed, and by the end of the night, they had unconsciously created a cocoon around themselves, blocking out everyone else in the room. As they prepared to leave, Marcus hesitated. The weight of his emotions pressed on him, but his gaze lingered on Anna. He struggled with the urge to say something, anything, that would reveal what he felt, but he remained silent, unsure if he was reading too much into the evening. He was, after all, a man with a reputation to maintain, and the last thing he wanted was to jeopardize his relationship with his son. Anna, sensing his hesitation, took a bold step forward, resting a hand on his arm. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice soft. "I don't think I've laughed like this in a long time." The warmth of her touch seemed to awaken something in Marcus. His gaze dropped to her hand, lingering there for a moment before he met her eyes again. "Neither have I," he replied, a slight tremor in his voice. They stood in silence, a shared understanding passing between them. But as quickly as the moment arrived, it was gone. Anna dropped her hand, a faint smile playing on her lips as she turned to leave. Marcus watched her go, a mix of relief and disappointment churning within him. He knew he was treading dangerous waters, but he couldn't deny the allure of her presence. Back home, Jeremy noticed subtle changes in Anna. She seemed more distant, her mind always wandering. When he questioned her, Anna brushed off his concerns with a smile, assuring him that she was just busy with work. Jeremy wanted to believe her, but something in her tone felt hollow. Despite his growing suspicions, he convinced himself that he was simply imagining things, that Anna was just adjusting to the new demands of her job. The turning point came one rainy afternoon when Marcus invited Anna over to discuss a potential collaboration between his company and her marketing firm. He framed it as a strictly professional meeting, something that would benefit both their careers. Jeremy was out of town on business, so there was no reason for him to suspect anything unusual. Anna arrived at Marcus's home, greeted by the sprawling architecture and the luxurious decor that defined the Caldwell estate. She'd been here before, but never alone with Marcus. The absence of Jeremy's presence created a charged atmosphere, heightening the tension that had been building between them. They sat in Marcus's office, discussing strategies and market trends, but the conversation quickly veered into more personal territory. Marcus found himself opening up to Anna, sharing details about his struggles, his fears, and the loneliness he felt despite his success. Anna listened intently, her empathy genuine but tinged with an underlying ambition that Marcus couldn't see. "You know, it's rare to find someone who understands this life," Marcus said, his gaze fixed on her. "Sometimes I feel like I'm speaking a different language with everyone around me." Anna reached out, placing a comforting hand on his. "You've built something remarkable, Marcus. I know it must feel isolating, but you're not alone." Their hands lingered, and the room grew quiet. Marcus's pulse quickened, the warmth of her touch stirring feelings he'd long suppressed. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and in that moment, all his reservations melted away. Before he could second-guess himself, he leaned forward, brushing his lips against hers in a tentative kiss. Anna didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into the kiss, her own desires bubbling to the surface. The kiss was brief, but it was enough to set the stage for what would come. When they pulled back, they exchanged a look filled with both guilt and excitement, neither daring to speak. They both knew they were crossing a line, but something unspoken drove them forward. As the afternoon waned, they talked in hushed tones, sharing secrets and dreams they had never spoken aloud. For Marcus, it was a rare chance to connect with someone on a deep level. For Anna, it was an opportunity to inch closer to the life she craved. In the days that followed, Marcus and Anna's affair grew in secrecy. They met in secluded cafes, exchanged stolen glances at public events, and savored brief encounters whenever they could manage it. They were careful, both acutely aware of the consequences if anyone found out, especially Jeremy. Yet the thrill of their deception only fueled their passion, creating a cycle they found increasingly difficult to break. Jeremy, meanwhile, became more suspicious. Anna's behavior was increasingly erratic. She was late to their dates, distracted, and seemed more secretive than ever. He noticed how she would disappear into another room to take phone calls, her voice hushed, her tone tense. When he confronted her, she would dismiss his concerns, assuring him that everything was fine. But Jeremy couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. His insecurities began to eat at him, fueled by his father's reputation and his own feelings of inadequacy. He had always worried that he could never live up to the Caldwell legacy, and now he feared that his relationship with Anna was slipping through his fingers. One evening, after another failed attempt to get Anna to open up, Jeremy turned to his father for advice. He shared his fears, hoping Marcus would offer some guidance. Marcus, caught off guard by his son's vulnerability, tried his best to reassure him. "Maybe she's just going through a rough patch," Marcus suggested, masking his own guilt with a concerned expression. "Sometimes people need space to figure things out." Jeremy nodded, but the unease remained. He thanked his father, appreciating the advice, yet he couldn't shake the nagging doubt that had taken root in his mind. The trust that had once defined his relationship with Anna was slowly crumbling, replaced by a growing sense of betrayal he couldn't yet place. As he left, Marcus watched him go, a pang of guilt gnawing at him. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, risking everything he held dear. Yet the allure of Anna, the excitement she brought to his life, made it hard for him to stop. He convinced himself that he could manage the situation, that he wouldn't let it go too far. But deep down, both he and Anna knew that they were only fooling themselves. The path they were on was one of deception and betrayal, and with each passing day, they found it harder to turn back. What had started as a thrill was now a haunting secret, a ticking clock counting down to a day of reckoning they both sensed but tried desperately to ignore. The affair deepens. The weeks following their first kiss became a blur of hidden meetings and hushed conversations. Marcus and Anna grew reckless, each encounter luring them deeper into their dangerous liaison. Their passion was laced with fear, yet the thrill of secrecy only amplified the desire between them. Every time they met, they convinced themselves it would be the last, yet both knew they had crossed a threshold from which neither wanted to retreat. For Anna, the affair was as much a game of power as it was about passion. She found herself drawn not only to Marcus's confidence and wealth, but to the life he embodied, a life of prestige and influence that she had never known but always craved. She recognized the lengths she was willing to go to secure her place in that world, no matter the cost. Yet, her manipulation was not without a sense of guilt. She genuinely cared for Jeremy, even if her feelings for him were overshadowed by her growing obsession with his father. Marcus, on the other hand, was caught in a paradox of his own making. He found himself both exhilarated and repulsed by his actions. The affair reminded him of his youth, of the days when he felt invincible, free from the restraints of responsibility. But now, as he watched his son's trust erode, he felt an ache of guilt that gnawed at him relentlessly. Jeremy was everything to him, the only family he had left. And yet, despite this, he couldn't stop himself from seeing Anna. Their relationship grew increasingly complex as they navigated their double lives. They met in places where they wouldn't be recognized, small, dimly lit cafes in nearby towns, secluded parks shielded by thick trees, and the occasional late-night rendezvous in the office after everyone had left. Each meeting was both intoxicating and torturous, a forbidden indulgence that consumed them even as it left them both on edge. Meanwhile, Jeremy's paranoia deepened. He found himself questioning Anna's every move, searching for signs of betrayal that he could neither confirm nor dismiss. Anna's demeanor shifted when they were together. She seemed distracted, her laughter hollow, her touches fleeting. When he tried to confront her about her behavior, she brushed him off with practiced ease, deflecting his suspicions and accusing him of being too clingy. One night, after a tense argument, Jeremy confided in a close friend, Ethan. They had been friends since childhood, and Jeremy trusted him implicitly. Over drinks, Jeremy poured out his frustrations, detailing Anna's strange behavior and the anxiety that had begun to consume him. "I feel like she's hiding something, Ethan," Jeremy admitted, his voice thick with uncertainty. "She's different, like she's a million miles away even when she's right beside me." Ethan listened, a frown etched into his face. "Have you talked to your dad about this?" he asked. "Maybe he can help. I mean, he seems to really like her." "Right." Jeremy nodded slowly, though he couldn't bring himself to reveal that he had, indeed, spoken to his father. The conversation had only intensified his doubts, as Marcus's advice felt hollow, almost rehearsed. He tried to brush it off as his imagination running wild, yet an uneasy feeling gnawed at him. Unknown to Jeremy, Marcus and Anna had met just the night before. They had agreed to meet in Marcus's private office, far from prying eyes. The evening was stormy, rain pounding against the windows as they sat across from each other, both too wrapped up in their deception to notice the world around them. Anna looked around, noting the awards and accolades that adorned Marcus's office. They were a stark reminder of the life she wanted but could never achieve on her own. As she ran her fingers over a framed photo of Marcus and Jeremy, a pang of guilt tugged at her. For a fleeting moment, she questioned what she was doing, but Marcus's presence overwhelmed her doubts, rekindling her ambition. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Marcus asked, sensing her unease. She hesitated, then smiled, slipping back into the role she had created for herself. "Just thinking how different my life would be if I'd known people like you earlier," she replied, her voice laced with admiration. Marcus took her hand, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. "We can't change the past, Anna, but maybe we can find a way to make up for it." Their eyes met, and within moments they were lost in each other once again, oblivious to the world outside. Yet the weight of their actions pressed heavily upon them. For every passionate encounter, the reality of their betrayal lingered, a dark cloud casting a shadow over their shared moments. One evening, while Marcus and Anna were in the throes of one of their clandestine meetings, Jeremy stumbled upon an unsettling clue. He had been looking for a file in his father's office when he noticed a faint trace of perfume on one of the guest chairs, a scent that was unmistakably Anna's. His heart pounded, confusion mixing with suspicion. He brushed it off as a mere coincidence, telling himself he was imagining things. But the scent haunted him, lingering in his mind as he tried to piece together the fragments of his crumbling relationship. Jeremy began to notice subtle changes in Anna's behavior, unexplained absences, mysterious phone calls, and vague excuses that did little to quell his doubts. The cracks in their relationship grew wider, each unanswered question eroding the trust he had once held in her. As his suspicions grew, Jeremy decided to confront Anna directly. One evening, he invited her over, hoping to have an open conversation about his concerns. Anna arrived, her demeanor calm and collected, but Jeremy could sense a guardedness in her posture. They sat across from each other in the dimly lit living room, the silence between them thick with tension. "Anna," Jeremy began, his voice unsteady. "I need you to be honest with me. Are you hiding something?" Anna's expression didn't falter. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. With a calm smile, she shook her head. "Jeremy, you're being paranoid. I've told you, I'm just busy with work. I don't know why you keep doubting me." Her words cut through him, leaving him feeling foolish. Yet, deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His insecurities clawed at him, filling him with self-doubt. He wanted to believe her, but a nagging voice in his mind warned him not to. As the weeks went by, Marcus and Anna continued their affair, each encounter driving them closer to the edge. They were careful, but the strain of living a double life began to take its toll. Marcus grew paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, terrified that someone would discover their secret. Anna, too, found herself consumed by fear, torn between her loyalty to Jeremy and her obsession with Marcus. One night, Marcus suggested they end their relationship, fearing the damage it could do to his family if they were discovered. But Anna, sensing her dreams slipping away, pleaded with him to reconsider. She reminded him of the connection they shared, the joy and excitement he had found with her. "Marcus, don't let fear control you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We can make this work. We just have to be careful." Her words reignited his resolve, and despite his better judgment, he agreed to continue their affair. But as they sealed their promise with a kiss, they both knew that their secret was a ticking time bomb, one that could explode at any moment. Jeremy's suspicions intensified as he uncovered more inconsistencies in Anna's stories. He became obsessed, analyzing every detail, every conversation, in search of answers. One evening, as he went through Anna's social media, he noticed something peculiar, a location tag on one of her recent posts. She had claimed to be at work, yet the tag indicated she was across town, near one of the places where Marcus frequently held meetings. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, and a chilling realization washed over him. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more devastating than the last. In that moment, Jeremy felt his heart shatter, the weight of betrayal crushing him. He knew he had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it would be. Secrets and lies. The day of reckoning was approaching, but none of them knew it yet. Marcus, Anna, and Jeremy were caught in a tangled web, each weighed down by their secrets and suspicions. For Jeremy, the truth was within reach, an unspoken horror he feared to confront. For Marcus and Anna, the thrill of their hidden affair had long since soared, replaced by a constant sense of paranoia and dread. As weeks passed, Marcus became increasingly uneasy. The fleeting moments with Anna, once intoxicating, now filled him with guilt and anxiety. He had been reckless, and the stakes were becoming too high. He feared not just for his reputation, but for the fragile relationship he still shared with Jeremy. In moments of clarity, he questioned why he had let himself get involved, why he had allowed his own loneliness to cloud his judgment. Yet each time he tried to end it, Anna would find a way to pull him back, reminding him of the vitality she brought to his life, of the excitement that had revived a part of him he thought long dead. Anna, however, was growing impatient. She had dreams, ambitions, and she was determined to climb her way up the social ladder. Marcus was a means to that end, but her feelings for him were complicated. She cared for him, even admired him, but she also saw the clock ticking down on her plans. Jeremy, though kind and endearing, didn't have the power, wealth, or status that Marcus did. And while she tried to ignore her guilt over deceiving him, a small part of her knew it wouldn't last forever. Jeremy, meanwhile, had become consumed by his doubts. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the distant look in Anna's eyes. Everything pointed to a betrayal he wasn't ready to accept. In his frustration, he grew increasingly irritable, snapping at Anna, distancing himself from friends, and even lashing out at his father, whose vague advice only fueled his suspicions. One night, the storm broke. Jeremy had been planning to meet Anna for dinner, hoping to finally address the issues that had plagued their relationship. But as he waited, minutes stretched into hours, and Anna never showed. He tried calling her, but his calls went unanswered. A terrible feeling sank into his stomach, a dread that he couldn't shake. Without thinking, he drove to his father's estate. The house was quiet as he pulled up, the dim lights casting long shadows over the lawn. Jeremy stepped out of his car, his heart pounding as he approached the house, unsure of what he was even searching for. Yet, a part of him knew he wouldn't leave without answers. Inside, Marcus and Anna were alone, seated in the study with glasses of wine. They hadn't intended to meet, but the tension between them had demanded resolution. They needed to talk, to find a way to end things before everything spiraled out of control. Yet even in the quiet of the study, the emotions they shared made it hard for either of them to let go. "Marcus, we can't keep doing this," Anna whispered, though her words lacked conviction. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his gaze fixed on the floor. "You're right," he murmured, but his voice was hesitant. "We've already gone too far." The silence that followed was thick, filled with unsaid apologies and regrets. But before they could continue, the door swung open, and Jeremy stood in the doorway, his face pale, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and horror. For a moment, none of them moved. Time seemed to freeze as Jeremy's gaze flickered between his father and Anna, piecing together the awful truth. His chest heaved, and he felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath him. "What is this?" Jeremy's voice was barely a whisper, but the accusation in his tone was deafening. Marcus stood, his face drained of color. "Jeremy, it's not what you think." "Not what I think." Jeremy's voice rose, anger and betrayal mixing in a torrent of emotion. "I knew something was going on, but I never thought." He turned to Anna, his expression twisted with anguish. "How could you?" Anna tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. She had prepared for many scenarios, but not this, not Jeremy standing here, broken and betrayed. She reached out a hand, but he recoiled, his eyes filled with hurt and disgust. "Don't," he hissed. "Don't touch me." Marcus took a step forward, his hands raised as if to calm his son. "Jeremy, listen. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but a mistake." Jeremy's laugh was hollow, bitter. "This isn't a mistake. This is a betrayal." He looked at his father, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. "You were the one person I trusted. And now, I can't even look at you." The words hit Marcus like a punch, each syllable driving home the reality of what he had done. He reached for his son, but Jeremy stepped back, his face hardening. "You think this is fixable. You think you can just apologize and everything will go back to normal. Jeremy shook his head, his expression fierce. You've both destroyed any chance of that. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the silent house. Marcus and Anna stood in the wake of his departure, both feeling the weight of their choices settle over them like a shroud. In the days that followed, Jeremy cut off all contact. He moved out of the family home, leaving Marcus to grapple with the consequences of his actions. He ignored calls, messages, and emails, determined to sever himself from the people who had betrayed him. The pain was too fresh, the wound too deep. Marcus, racked with guilt, found himself slipping into a depression. He tried to reach out to Jeremy, but every attempt was met with silence. The house felt empty, hollow without his son's presence. He spent sleepless nights in his study, surrounded by memories of a life he had irreparably damaged. Anna, too, felt the sting of her choices. She tried to contact Jeremy, to explain, to apologize, but he wanted nothing to do with her. Her carefully constructed plans had crumbled, leaving her adrift. She realized, too late, that she had been playing with fire, and now she was left with nothing but ashes. One evening, as Marcus sat alone in his study, he heard a knock on the door. He opened it to find Anna standing there, looking as lost as he felt. Without a word, she stepped inside, and they sat together in silence, both too broken to speak. They had created this mess together, and now they were left to pick up the pieces, but neither of them could escape the reality of what they had done. Their relationship, once passionate and thrilling, now felt tainted, a painful reminder of the lives they had destroyed. They had each sought something from the other, a connection, an escape, a sense of belonging. But in their desperation, they had torn apart the very fabric of their lives. Days turned into weeks, and as the dust began to settle, the consequences of their choices became clear. Marcus's business suffered, his reputation tarnished by whispers and rumors. Anna found herself isolated, shunned by friends who once admired her. They were both trapped in the aftermath of their betrayal, unable to move forward, unable to find solace. Jeremy, meanwhile, tried to rebuild his life, though the scars remained. He had trusted them, loved them, and they had shattered that trust beyond repair. He resolved to leave Maplewood Hills, to start fresh in a place where their shadows couldn't follow him. He was done with his father, done with Anna, done with the lies that had poisoned his life. As he packed his things, he glanced at a photo of him and his father, taken years ago, when everything was simpler, when he believed in family, in loyalty, in love. He placed the photo face down, unwilling to let the past haunt him any longer. The Caldwell family, once admired and respected, had been torn apart from within. The truth had surfaced, shattering the illusions they had each clung to. And as they faced the ruins of their lives, they realized that some wounds could never be healed, some betrayals could never be forgiven. The breaking point. The days stretched into a cold, unforgiving silence. Marcus, once surrounded by family and respect, now found himself abandoned in his mansion, the echoes of his choices reverberating through the empty halls. His once proud life had withered into a hollow existence. In his rare moments of sleep, he dreamt of simpler times, only to wake with a gnawing ache that never left. Anna's situation was no better. Shunned by the friends who had once admired her, ostracized by the professional circles she had worked so hard to impress, she drifted through each day like a ghost, haunted by the irreversible consequences of her ambition. The luxury and influence she pursued now felt like ashes in her mouth, leaving her with nothing but memories of what she had sacrificed. And Jeremy, he was nowhere to be found. Since that fateful night, Jeremy had severed all ties, vanishing into the anonymity of the city. He had cut off his father and blocked Anna from every possible avenue of contact, desperate to escape the remnants of his former life. For him, they no longer existed. Reduced to painful memories, he tried to bury beneath a new identity, far removed from Maplewood Hills and everything it had once meant to him. But even as Jeremy sought to leave it all behind, his anger simmered. Despite his resolve to move on, thoughts of his father and Anna intruded on his mind. Images of their betrayal haunted him. Anna's dismissive smile, Marcus's strained apologies, the memory of finding them together in his father's study. Each one pierced him like a knife, keeping his wounds fresh. Months later, Jeremy received a single message that changed everything. It was from Ethan, his childhood friend, who had stayed in Maplewood Hills. The message was brief, but its impact was immediate. Your father's a mess. He needs you. And I think he's on the verge of something dark. Jeremy's hand tightened around his phone, rage flaring up inside him once again. He wanted to ignore the message, to erase it and let his father suffer the consequences of his actions. But an instinct deeper than anger forced him to pause. He knew what Ethan meant. The brokenness in his father's face that night, the lost look in his eyes, all pointed to a man on the edge. Despite his bitterness, Jeremy couldn't turn a blind eye to that image. Against his better judgment, he returned to Maplewood Hills, but not to reconcile. He would come to make his final stand, to confront the father who had failed him. He needed closure, an end to the pain that lingered between them. The evening he arrived was eerily quiet. The mansion, once filled with life and light, seemed shrouded in darkness. The air was thick with a foreboding sense of inevitability as Jeremy approached the house, a mixture of resentment and obligation tugging at him. Inside, he found Marcus alone, hunched over in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a defeated look in his eyes. Marcus looked up as Jeremy entered, surprise and sorrow flitting across his face. He set his glass down, his hand trembling slightly. "Jeremy," he said softly, his voice cracking. "I didn't think you'd ever come back." Jeremy's expression was hard, his face set in a mask of anger. "I didn't come here for you," he replied coldly. "I came here to say goodbye." The words hit Marcus like a blow. He straightened, his face stricken. "Goodbye. Jeremy, please. I know I hurt you. I made a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake. But don't you understand? You're my son. You're all I have left." Jeremy's jaw clenched, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "You're the one who threw it all away, Dad. You betrayed me, betrayed everything this family was supposed to stand for. And for what? A fling? A few moments of excitement with a woman half your age." Marcus looked away, unable to meet his son's gaze. "It wasn't like that," he whispered, shame coloring his tone. It was a moment of weakness, a mistake. But it wasn't worth losing you." The words might have softened Jeremy's anger if they hadn't sounded so hollow. "A mistake. That's all you have to say." He laughed bitterly. "You don't get it, do you? You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything I believed in. You were the one person I looked up to, the one person I trusted. And you threw it all away for her." The mention of Anna reignited Marcus's own guilt, but something else stirred within him too, a defensiveness he hadn't expected. "She was more than that, Jeremy," he said, his voice low but firm. She made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. And maybe that doesn't make sense to you, but I needed that. I needed someone who saw me as a person, not just as your father." Jeremy's expression darkened, disbelief etched on his face. "So this is my fault now. You're blaming me for your mistakes." Marcus shook his head, his own frustration mounting. "No, I'm not blaming you. I'm just trying to explain." "Explain what?" "That you're a selfish man who only cares about himself." Jeremy's voice grew louder, cutting Marcus off. "All those years you pushed me, held me to impossible standards, and yet you're the one who threw everything away. How am I supposed to respect you after that?" Marcus fell silent, his face etched with regret. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. For the first time, he looked truly broken, stripped of the confidence and authority that had always defined him. And as Jeremy watched his father struggle, a part of him felt a pang of pity, a flicker of the love that had once bonded them. But the moment was fleeting, quickly overtaken by a surge of anger as another figure stepped into the room. Anna. She had returned as well, unable to stay away from the man she had seduced and the life she had almost claimed for herself. Her entrance froze both men, an unwelcome reminder of the betrayal they now shared. "Jeremy," she began, her tone soft, pleading. "I know you hate me, and you have every right to. But please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Jeremy's eyes narrowed, his hands clenching into fists. "You don't get to explain anything, Anna. You lied to me, used me, and destroyed my family. You're as guilty as he is." Anna's face crumpled, but she stood her ground, glancing at Marcus as if for support. But he was silent, unable to look at her or his son, his face a mask of grief. "You both make me sick," Jeremy continued, his voice shaking with rage. "You're everything I never wanted to become. Selfish, careless, willing to betray anyone to get what you want. I'm done with both of you." And with those words, Jeremy turned to leave. But as he reached the doorway, Marcus's voice stopped him, filled with desperation and pain. "Jeremy, please, don't leave like this. I know I've lost your trust, but don't walk away forever. Please." Jeremy paused, his back turned, his shoulders tense. "I already said goodbye, Dad. This time, it's for good." As he walked away, Marcus slumped back into his chair, his hands covering his face, his heart breaking under the weight of his son's final words. Anna stood silently, the reality of their actions crashing over her. She had ruined more than a relationship. She had destroyed a family, leaving scars that might never heal. The door slammed shut behind Jeremy, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus sat in his chair, unmoving, lost in the devastation of what he had done. Anna lingered nearby, her face pale, realizing that everything she had desired had turned to dust. She reached out to Marcus, but he pulled away, his expression one of despair and contempt. "Leave," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Just leave." Anna hesitated, her eyes filled with regret, but she knew there was nothing more to say. With a final, sorrowful glance, she turned and left the room, her footsteps echoing through the empty house as she disappeared into the night. Marcus remained alone, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like a crushing wave. The love and trust he had once taken for granted were gone, replaced by the empty shell of a life he had single-handedly destroyed. And as the night stretched on, he realized with a painful clarity that there would be no redemption, no forgiveness. Only the hollow, aching silence of a man who had lost everything he once held dear. Aftermath and reckoning. Months had passed since that last explosive confrontation, but for Marcus, the house remained frozen in time. The emptiness stretched through each room, every corner a haunting reminder of the life he had shattered. Dust gathered on the family photos, and the once immaculate estate had grown cold, neglected, a symbol of the ruin his choices had wrought. In his solitude, Marcus drifted through memories of his former life, playing out every decision, every mistake, like a tragic symphony. He had lost his son, his only family, over a fleeting passion that had burned brighter than anything he had felt in years. The thrill that Anna had brought into his life now felt like poison in his veins, and the guilt ate away at him, erasing any remaining pride or sense of accomplishment. The scandal of their affair had spread like wildfire through Maplewood Hills. It was only a matter of time before rumors leaked, and now whispers followed Marcus everywhere he went. He was no longer seen as the esteemed businessman who had built a legacy. He was the man who had betrayed his son and ruined his family. Clients withdrew, deals vanished, and his reputation lay in tatters. Once respected, Marcus was now regarded with contempt, his fall from grace complete. But the loss that struck him deepest was Jeremy's silence. Despite all his attempts, his son had refused any form of contact. Marcus had left messages, letters, and even begged mutual friends to pass along his pleas for forgiveness, but Jeremy remained unreachable. The quiet finality of his absence was a daily reminder that some wounds could never be healed. As for Anna, she too had been forced to confront the consequences of her choices. She had fled Maplewood Hills, leaving behind the wreckage of the life she had tried to build. Her hopes of climbing the social ladder and securing a place among the elite had crumbled, and the doors that once opened for her now shut firmly in her face. The professional world was unforgiving, and word of her affair with Marcus had spread, branding her as both an opportunist and a homewrecker. In the city, she took up a modest job at a small marketing agency, her ambitions reduced to survival. She had no friends, no support, and the thrill of her former life seemed a distant memory. On the rare nights when she allowed herself to think about it, she felt a hollow ache, a quiet despair for all that had been lost. She missed the power she had once felt, the promise of security and influence, but above all, she regretted losing Jeremy. She had never expected to care for him as she had, but in his kindness and simplicity, he had given her something genuine, something she couldn't find anywhere else. But now, that too was gone. One evening, as she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, she made a decision. She wrote Jeremy a letter. She poured out everything, her regrets, her remorse, her acknowledgement of the damage she had done. She didn't ask for forgiveness, knowing she didn't deserve it, but she wanted him to know the depth of her guilt and the extent of her suffering. She mailed the letter, not expecting a reply, but hoping that in some small way it might bring him a sliver of peace. As for Jeremy, life after Maplewood Hills had been both liberating and harrowing. He had settled into a small apartment in the heart of the city, working long hours at a new job to fill the emptiness left by his father and Anna's betrayal. He had cut all ties with the past, reinventing himself among strangers who knew nothing of the pain he carried. In time, he hoped to bury the memories altogether. But the scars ran deep, and the bitterness lingered. Nights were the hardest. Alone with his thoughts, he found himself revisiting the pain, replaying that final confrontation, and the betrayal etched on his father's face. He despised both Marcus and Anna, but he found that he despised himself even more for still caring, for still yearning for the family he had lost. It was on one such night that Anna's letter arrived. At first he had been tempted to throw it away, to ignore her words and maintain his silence. But curiosity, and something deeper, perhaps a need for closure, compelled him to open it. Her words were raw, leaden with regret, and as he read, he felt a strange mixture of anger and sadness. She described her loneliness, her remorse, and the sense of purposelessness that now filled her life. It didn't absolve her of her actions, and it didn't lessen his pain, but it gave him a window into her own suffering. For the first time, he saw Anna not as the manipulator who had torn his family apart, but as a woman who had made a series of terrible choices and was now paying the price. It didn't make him forgive her, but it softened the hard edges of his resentment, leaving room for something that felt almost like pity. A few weeks later, Jeremy received an unexpected call from his childhood friend, Ethan. "Hey, Jeremy," Ethan's voice was hesitant. "Your dad. I think he needs you." Jeremy's instinct was to ignore it, to let Marcus suffer in the silence he deserved. But Ethan's voice lingered in his mind, and after days of restless indecision, he decided to visit the town. He convinced himself that it wasn't forgiveness, just a way to find closure and end things properly. He would see his father one last time, and then he could finally move on. The day he returned to Maplewood Hills was gray, the sky overcast as if reflecting the somber purpose of his visit. He arrived at the mansion, his heart pounding with a mix of anger, sadness, and the faintest glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, something had changed. Inside, he found Marcus seated in the study, looking frail and weary, a shadow of the man he had once been. The sight filled Jeremy with a complicated rush of emotions, pain, anger, and a strange sense of compassion. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence heavy between them. Marcus looked up, his gaze filled with sorrow. "Jeremy." His voice cracked. "I didn't think I'd see you again." Jeremy took a deep breath, his face unreadable. "I came to say goodbye, Dad. I need closure, and I think you do too." Marcus nodded, his face etched with regret. He swallowed, his hands trembling as he tried to find the right words. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I did to you. I wish I could take it back. I lost my way, Jeremy. And I lost you." The words hit Jeremy harder than he'd anticipated. He had prepared himself for anger, for resentment, but the sincerity in his father's voice made him falter. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad. You hurt me in a way I can't even describe. You took everything I believed in and broke it." Marcus nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I know. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. For everything." Jeremy felt the weight of his father's words sink in, the sorrow in his tone resonating with his own. He had come here seeking closure, but he hadn't expected to feel the stirrings of empathy. He remembered the man his father used to be, the man he had once admired, loved, and trusted. And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps, beneath the ruin of betrayal, a part of that man still remained. As he turned to leave, Jeremy paused in the doorway. He glanced back at Marcus, his heart conflicted. "Goodbye, Dad," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus watched his son walk away, his eyes filled with a pain that words could not convey. He knew that this was the end, that the wounds he had inflicted were too deep to heal. But as he sat alone in the empty house, he felt a strange sense of peace, knowing that for a brief moment, he had been given a chance to express his remorse. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Jeremy left Maplewood Hills for the last time, feeling a sense of release. The burden he had carried was still there, but lighter now, no longer bound by the anger and resentment that had once consumed him. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it, free from the shadows of his past. And as for Marcus, he spent his remaining days in solitude, haunted by memories of a life he had let slip through his fingers. He would never find redemption, but he had come to accept his fate. He had made his choices, and now he would live with the echoes of the life he had lost, a man marked by his own undoing. In the end, the Caldwell family remained forever fractured, a poignant reminder of the fragile nature of trust, the devastation of betrayal, and the tragic cost of choices made in moments of weakness.